Good evening, everybody. My name is Mike Haltman. I am the CEO of Hallmark Abstract Service. And tonight I am going to be your host, your guide, your Sherpa for Do You Ever Wonder? It is a LinkedIn Live program that our firm has put together. And the idea is not to bring you anything to do with what we actually do in real life, but really to bring you guests who can bring immediate value to your lives, actionable ideas, actionable thoughts, actionable tools that you can take with you, hopefully after this, and really apply. So I'm not going to mention our guest's name quite yet, but taking a look at 2020 and into 2021, it's been nothing short of a year and change of disruption, of forced innovation, of people having to pivot, whether in their personal lives, in their business lives, in basically every aspect of our lives. And disruption and innovation in a different time meant different things, but it's really all of the same. And towards that end, I'd like to read a quick quote. And I typically don't read, but I don't want to get it wrong. The quote is, "Pivoting is not the end of the disruption process, but the beginning of the next phase of the journey." And, you know, if you really think about that and dissect the quote, it's a very sage quote. And we'll get into it a little bit later. But right now, I'd like to introduce our guest and first give you a little bit of background. So he's got a very, very deep resume, and I'm only going to go over a few of his accomplishments and successes. But he's a serial entrepreneur. He's a best-selling author of the book Disrupt This. He has built and sold a multitude of million-dollar companies. He's advised business leaders. He's actually advised popes and presidents on orchestrating positive change. He writes for the Wall Street Journal. He appears on CNBC, CNN, and MSNBC. And please join me in welcoming, and we couldn't be more excited, particularly at this time in our evolution, Jay Samit. Jay, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mike.
Absolutely.
A lot of fun to be here.
You know what? It's a true honor to have somebody of your stature joining me tonight. And I think if you wouldn't mind, I left a few things out. Would you like to just go over a few aspects of your background?
No, I would just say I'm no different than anybody watching this or listening to this. I bought into society's promise, go to school, get good grades, and live happily ever after. And it doesn't work out that way. I graduated college when there was a recession and had to figure it out. Over a lifetime of creating multi-billion-dollar companies, you notice a pattern. If you would have told me growing up in inner city Philadelphia that dozens of my friends would become self-made billionaires, I would have asked you what you were smoking and give me some. But I've now seen the pattern and I've taught people how to do it. And I believe everyone has it within them. And to prove it, my new book, Future Proofing You, I took a young immigrant who grew up on welfare, mentored him one day a week for a year, and took him from a homeless to self-made millionaire, spoiler alert, in 11 months. And I break it down to the 12 truths. You follow them and you'll have the same results.
Well, that's why I'm so excited, and hopefully the people listening are excited, because, you know, you talk about, you know, all that you've accomplished, and, you know, you talk about overcoming obstacles. And I know that you at an early age overcame quite a significant obstacle for some, for others maybe not as bad, but you were dyslexic and still are dyslexic.
Yeah, so I grew up in Philadelphia, and we had reading groups in first grade, the Eagles, the Hawks, and the Mud Hens. And when you're a mud hen at 5, the society doesn't have great expectations for you. So wanting to mask my embarrassment, whenever there was a group assignment, I'd volunteer to lead it, and you do the writing, you do the reading, delegate everything. Great training for being an entrepreneur and a CEO. Turns out Richard Branson, dyslexic. Walt Disney, dyslexic. 1/3 of Fortune 500 CEOs, dyslexic. It is a superpower because we just think differently, not that we think wrong. And one of my 12 truths is we all have something that makes us unique. And you can lean into that. And that's what will give you your greatest success. And in Future Proofing You, talk about a young man who had ADHD. And he hated how fogged he was in the drugs in middle school that they made him take. And the only time he could slow down his brain and calm was in the backyard pool. So he asked his mom, if I promise to swim every day, can you take me off of these drugs? And the doctor and the mom agreed. And he kept his word of the promise. By the end of his teenage years, he had 17 Olympic medals. You know him as Michael Phelps. So his superpower was the ADHD. And so I wrote Disrupt You because everybody thinks of changing the world, but nobody thinks of changing themselves. And once you see how malleable you are, that little voice that tells you what you can't do is wrong. If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. It's that simple.
Well, that's interesting. You've talked, and I've heard you speak in the past about disruption through introspection, how we all have a little voice in our heads. We all have our doubts. You know, we all have demons that we have to overcome. And I know from a personal point of view, that's very true. Can you talk a little bit about how that
Sure.
can really help mold people?
So your parents, your teachers, other well-wishers during your formative years wanted to shield you from pain. So little Mikey's not good at this. Go do this. Don't do that. Take the safe job. And you wake up one day and you pigeonholed yourself to believe these things. And you're the only one keeping those blinders on. In third grade, you didn't know 7 times 8. So now your whole life you believe you're not good at math, or you peed your pants at show and tell, so you're not a public speaker. Nothing could be further than the truth. We can rewire our brains. Actually, biologically, we can rewire our brains. And it all starts with the truth number one. You have to have a growth mindset. So with this young immigrant as an example, if you grew up on welfare, if you grew up in a tough neighborhood, if your parents were on welfare, if you really don't have any role models to think of, how could I quickly change his mindset if I'm going to try to have this audacious thing of could he become self-made millionaire in a year? And so he didn't find this out till he read the book, but in our first meeting, I lied to him. There's a psychological principle called the Pygmalion effect. A professor went to a school, tested all the kids and told the teachers these 3 kids would be super learners, super achievers, they would kill it. And at the end of the year, when they tested the whole school, those 3 kids excelled everybody. But the professor lied. He just picked 3 names out of a hat. But if you tell people they're special and you treat them special, the results speak for the same. So that's what it did with this young man. And all of us have to reevaluate what we think we are. It's like plastic surgery, but you get to hold the scalpel. And what you don't like, what you were that bothered you yesterday is not who you have to wake up and be tomorrow. Your future isn't written by the fates. You have complete control of that.
Well, that's interesting. Most people, when you think about life and where you're going to be and whether you're going to be playing a game, the phrase self-fulfilling prophecy comes up quite often. When you're a kid, if your parents raise you with love and support, then theoretically your self-fulfilling prophecy is that you're going to believe in yourself and hopefully excel and achieve. And if your parents treat you as if you're not going to do that, that it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy that you're going to grow up and fail. But your perspective is quite different and refreshing. That really we decide.
If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. It's as simple as that. So once you accept that, then you have to get to the next phase, which is you're going to fail. And failing doesn't mean you're not worthy, you're not capable. It means you tried something that didn't work. A toddler doesn't wake up one day and go, today I shall walk across the room. They take a step, they fall, they course correct, and eventually they learn to walk. When you play a video game, you don't sit down and 4 hours later go, ha, I made it to the end. You hit an impenetrable obstacle and you hammer at it till you get past it. And guess what? Then there's another one. And that's what life is. But here's the secret. If you have problems, you're halfway to success. Because entrepreneurs don't sell things, they solve things. You solve for a few people, you have friends, solve for 1 million, you make money, solve for 1 billion, you get to change history. So if you have problems, odds are other people share those same problems. And you don't have to invent some flux capacitor, It can be the smallest of problem. And future-proofing you, one of my favorite examples was something every parent can relate to. It's the middle of the week, it's Wednesday night, it's 10 o'clock. Your kid's making a poster board for their presentation for school the next day, and they mess it up. Mommy, please take me to the store, get me another board. So the mom goes and does this, but before she's going to do this again, she takes a ruler and makes thin little lines across it. In the morning, she's talking and says, why is it nobody sells poster board with thin little lines? Make a long story short, she got a patent. She makes about $5 million. No employees, just solving a very basic problem.
Right. So, I mean, basically, when we try, 2020 was very difficult for people, where, you know, a lot of people lost their livelihoods.
The middle class got wiped out. Let me give you the numbers for the US. The top 150 individuals doubled their lifetime net worth. Let that sink in. Not what they make in a year. It was their greatest moment in history. So disruption isn't about what happens to you. It's about how you respond to what happens to you. The bottom 140 million Americans basically have a negative net worth. They own less than what they owe. And so when you see what happened in our nation's capital, what I saw was thousands of people feeling left out, left behind, fighting over leftovers because this get a good job, get a pension, live happily ever after, debt-free doesn't exist. And globally, the pandemic wiped out the middle class. And if you want to have peace and freedom and a good life, you need a middle class. And the only people that create jobs are entrepreneurs. And that's why I dedicate whatever time I have left on this planet to teaching people how to do this. I don't make a dime from any of this.
So the people who are listening, or just regular people who aren't listening but may someday listen, you're sitting there, you lost your job, you're locked up in your house, you're going through your savings. You know, the idea of becoming an entrepreneur at that point is probably, light years away, because your mental state of mind is so bad. So in a pandemic, in that kind of situation, how does somebody pivot, innovate?
Sure.
And
so it starts with, Tiger Woods may be the greatest golfer of all time, but if nobody had ever given him a golf club, we wouldn't know it. So anybody sitting there, that whether they're out of work or whether they're at a job that just pays them enough to show up but not enough to care, not enough to live the way they want to live, probably wasn't taught or shown that there's another path. There's a teacher who won Teacher of the Year. She adapted my first book, Disrupt You, to teach high school kids in a tough neighborhood that there was a difference, that they had a third choice between would you like fries with that and going to prison, that they could actually become entrepreneurs. And it doesn't take any capital. Your phone connects you to 7 billion customers. You're one click away. So you only have to be right for a nanosecond. You don't need capital. I started my first company for $1.
well, let me give you a personal example. So in 2008, in the financial crisis, my company, I owned a commercial mortgage lending company. My wife was involved in a hard money lending company, and when Lehman failed, they both became non-viable. You're at a low, and you're trying to figure out what to do next. And how do you? Phones existed then, but how would you, or how have you just said, you know what, I'm gonna become an entrepreneur, and I'm gonna sell this to all of the people that I have access to.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily people that you know, or even in your own city or country. So let's start with the basics. You only need 2 things to succeed: insight and perseverance. In Disrupt You and Future Proofing You, I teach people how to get insight, how to find that idea that they can monetize quickly with no cash. This isn't a get-rich-quick scheme. I should say that the young man that I mentored worked harder than most people are willing to work for a year so he can live the rest of his life in a manner most people can't. I think that's a fair trade. Perseverance, that comes from within. And if you can turn that perseverance into passion, it'll get you through those rough spots if you're solving for something other than your own needs. But I'll give you my personal story, which is, pre-internet. I'm on the wrong side of 50. Got out of college, didn't know what I wanted to do. There was this movie called Star Wars. I go, oh my God, this is a great movie. I want to make Hollywood special effects. I know nobody in Hollywood. I know nothing about special effects. Well, I knew that most people couldn't afford George Lucas ILM for their little pictures. So I printed business cards for $1, made a production company. Jay Samit, it was mine, so I named it Jasmine. But I knew nobody would trust their feature film on a 21-year-old kid. So I just made myself head of sales, not head of the company. Went out and hustled jobs. I got them, had no idea how to do them. And then you hire the people that know how to do it. Steve Jobs built a $1 trillion tech company, could not read code or write a line of code. He didn't have to. Okay? So people have to understand that. People have to understand deal structure. How did he get the foremost brain of the time, Wozniak? He gave him half the company. What was the company worth? Nothing. So people have this fixed mindset that the only way to make money is I have to take your money. I buy a banana for $1, I sell it to you for $2. That's what they taught you in 4th grade. That's not how wealth is made. Before the pandemic, every 48 hours, a new self-made billionaire happens. I don't know what you did this weekend, but you're a slacker, Mike. Now it's every 26 hours. So what's different? The difference is the infrastructure is there to reach all these people. You just have to figure out what it is you want to solve for. So if I went to you and I said, okay, my last company I sold for $200 million, I'm starting a new one, I'll give you 10% for $10,000. What do I now have? I have $10,000 in cash and $90,000 in stock that I can hire people, buy things, trade things. That money didn't come from the Federal Reserve. It didn't come from a bank. So there's not a shortage of capital. Entrepreneurs actually create money out of thin air. So once people can understand that there is abundance, that brings us to the most critical thing. There are others that believe that there's abundance because it's true, which means that there are people that are willing to mentor you for free. You're going to need a series of mentors because the world is changing so fast. So why not get people onto your team that can help you, guide you, so you're not sitting there alone saying, my business failed, I'm a failure. When you should say, I tried something that used to work, it doesn't work anymore. What should I try now?
And where do those mentors exist?
So the easiest place is I teach people how to find them by looking through LinkedIn and people's profiles on LinkedIn to find the right people. And it's not, writing a stranger, will you be my mentor? That's like walking to a bar and saying, hey, will you have my baby? Doesn't work that way. It may work for you. It doesn't never work for me. Mother Teresa had a mentor. Oprah had mentors. Even Bill Gates, his mother made sure that he got Warren Buffett as mentor because maybe being one of the richest people in the world has different problems that you might want to learn some answers to and not make the same mistakes. So you can't go it alone.
So just as an example, because there's a lot of people who really aren't sure how to proceed. So let's say I'm pursuing an entrepreneurial idea. Okay. It's not exactly getting a lot of traction, and I want a mentor who can help guide me. Right. Now, I know how to use LinkedIn. How do let's say I find someone who's in that area, who's in that genre.
Somebody that's in that field, that has success in that field, look in their in their profile. Are they active in charity? Do they care about other things than themselves? You can look at somebody that's posting, that's writing articles, comment on those articles, begin a relationship and a dialogue.
So like everything else, finding a mentor is all about relationship building, the same way finding a client is about relationship building. Everything comes down to the same thing at the end of the day, relationships.
The past 14,000 years of civilization have been us living beyond our immediate tribe. So we're all in this together. And if you have a great idea, you will have people come to it like moths to a flame. I had this idea when I sold my first software company. Mark Andreessen had just put the interface on the internet, so the web made it popular. And I said, wow, this could be the solution to the separate but equal Brown versus School of Education of poor neighborhoods having poor schools and rich neighborhoods having rich schools, because we fund schools through property taxes to make sure that the poor continue to be uneducated. It's a broken system. But if we could put the internet into every classroom, everybody could have equal access to knowledge. Whether they decide to watch, a hamster eating a taco or learn something, that's up to the individual, but at least give them the chance. So I had a 20-person company. Nobody ever heard of me. I was nobody. I started writing and talking about this idea. One day I got a call from the President of the United States, make it happen. Not a penny in federal funds. 18 months later, we had wired every classroom in the US. How do we do it? By attracting other people that can help solve the problem. At the end of this event, the president came to a school where we pulled the wire and wore the hard hats and, photo op. And we did photos with the White House photographer. And a month later, I get a signed photo from President Clinton thanking me. And it's a 3-shot. It's the president, me, and another dude. And my ego's like, I would have liked, a 2-shot, but it's not about me. And I had that on my wall for years and years. And about 10 years into it, people start going, "Oh, you're friends with Eric Schmidt?" He was a out-of-work guy from Novell, went on, for those that don't know, to be chairman of Google. Wow. Mark Cuban worked on my first social network 10 years before Facebook. I mean, you will see these bright lights attracted to good ideas. And if your idea isn't getting traction, you shouldn't be going to people for validation. That's the biggest mistake. You should go to people to kill your idea because your idea sucks, and find everybody that could be a customer to tell you why it sucks.
So
and
you shouldn't be looking, don't look for yes men, look for...
Yeah. And when no one can find a flaw, that's when you start spending money, because you have a zombie idea, an idea that can't be killed. And you'll find raising money becomes real easy, getting market traction becomes real easy. You'll hit other obstacles, scaling. Reid Hoffman, who wrote the intro to Disrupt You and one of the smartest human beings on the planet, did PayPal, did LinkedIn, first money into Facebook, first money into Airbnb, et cetera, et cetera. LinkedIn got stuck. He came to me because he needed help getting it to catch on. We all have our areas of strength. No one has it across the board. I used to run the world's largest music company, EMI. We had the Beatles and Pink Floyd and Queen and et cetera, et cetera. And you'd have one of our artists on the stage alone, 100,000 screaming fans, and people believe in the self-made man or woman. They did it on their own. There they are singing from their heart to yours. They don't see the producers and songwriters and musicians and agents and managers and lawyers and thousands of marketing people that it takes to make that moment happen.
Right. Just doesn't happen.
And today, social media makes it twice as hard because no one sees anyone's life. They see the greatest hits. Like, I went to one baseball game in my life. What a boring thing. Nothing happens. But if you only saw baseball on the news, he hits it, he catches it, he runs, he slides it. The one game I went to, by the way, happened to be the Dodgers' only no-hitter.
That's pretty good.
Which means nothing happened. Is another way of saying that, with two little kids that you're trying to show how much fun going to a baseball game is?
Well, Jay, let me ask you two things. One, we're running out of time unbelievably, although believably because you have, we only scratched the surface. But for people who are struggling, who would like to pursue an idea, who don't really know how to get started, would love to get started, would your books help them? And I said at the beginning, I'm not here to sell anything, but you have something to offer.
I wrote the books for the sole purpose to help people.
Okay.
I tried this at the college level. I've had students do $100 million. I mean, let that sink in for a second. Kids in their 20s do $100 million. It is teachable. Ask anybody that sells nonfiction books that isn't doing Harry Potter. I'm not doing it. The publisher makes some money for their time. But for the price of a macchiato and a donut, wouldn't you want to change your life? So I wrote Future Proofing You specifically for those people that believe that they can't do it. Because if you could watch one person's journey, that you're at least starting with a social network, something better off than this young immigrant who was all alone in this country. And that's where I start. If people want to start right away, at my website, jaysamit.com, JAYSAMIT.
Scrolling across the bottom.
You can get free workbooks that you can download. that help you get the most out of each chapter. So by the end of the book, you have a plan of action. And I've heard letters from people in 140 countries. My book's in a bunch of languages now. And I don't say it to brag, but these are universal truths that nothing in it, or you're going to go, wow, this is rocket science. This is, chemistry. This is, no one bothered to show you how the world worked because they wanted to turn you into an employee to make someone else's dreams come true, not yours.
Well, so for the people listening, Jay Samit, his website is scrolling along the bottom. But before we go, I have another question for you. So you said, using LinkedIn, reaching out to people, speaking to people. So can you just touch on, because a lot of people are a little bit not great at communication skills. Can you just discuss for a second, the importance of both verbal and written ability to communicate?
Absolutely. I mean, if you can't get your idea across, you won't be able to get customers. You won't be able to get people to come follow you as the Pied Piper to build it. You won't be able to get investors. I mean, it all starts with that basic. Here's the key to being better at communicating. Solve for others to solve for you. So when I was a young startup knowing nobody in the world, computers suddenly got sound, which occurred to me that video games could have something more than beep, beep, beep. Why can't video games have an awesome rock and roll soundtrack? So that would make you want to buy a Microsoft PC that has sound as opposed to a game system that just goes beep, beep, beep. So I wrote to Bill Gates, somebody I didn't know, who was the richest man in the world. And I asked him to do a favor that would help him. Would he write a letter of introduction to David Geffen, the richest man in the music industry, who sold his company for over $1 billion, to take a meeting with me because I wanted to take music and put it in games, and David knew everybody. He was the Eagles and John Lennon and da-da-da. And Bill Gates did it. Now, if Bill had not done it, what did I lose? If you ask out Miss America and she says no, what did you lose? If she says yes, it's the greatest day of your life. So I've lived my entire life with that approach. Just try.
Have the gumption.
Yeah.
That is excellent advice. And one of the things we didn't get to talk about is the disruption of different industries, how business owners and how entrepreneurs can deal with that disruption, how they can get in front of that disruption.
Yeah, you have to. Half of all jobs will disappear this decade in the US. People, I spent 5 years circumnavigating the globe after Disrupt You to tell people, whether by choice or circumstance, every career gets disrupted. I don't have to make that argument anymore. I think the pandemic just did a great job of proving that. And I gave a speech that the biggest disruption we're going to see in our lives, I made the speech at Singularity University 6 years ago, was a pandemic that hits. And nobody thinks it. But these are also great opportunities. There's somebody that was out of work that started, taking a piece of plexi and make a little hole in it so the nail salon you could slip your nails through, or, the 1,000 other cottage industries that grew up. Every change is an opportunity. Every problem is an opportunity in disguise. So the more problems, it just comes back to that. And you really just have to focus on that positive mindset and moving forward.
Well, we had spoken briefly, not here, but about real estate, about artificial intelligence, about blockchain, about cryptocurrency, and just all of the changes that are hitting industries such as mine. So here's the bottom line. If you were going to start on a table from scratch today, would you have the transfer of ownership of a house from one person to another have the exorbitant amount of fees that presently exist? Of course not. It depends which end of the business I'm in.
No, you wouldn't, because it would be irrational to start a system like this. Nobody would go along with it. So there is a certain amount of momentum that dinosaur industries have, but they go extinct. Okay? The Stone Age didn't end because we ran out of stones. Okay? Something better came along. So will the real estate industry have as many humans involved in title, insurance, realtors, et cetera, down the line, lawyers? Absolutely not. Okay. Is this a change that's going to happen by Tuesday? No. Are lobbyists and institutions put up? Yes. When Elon took over Tesla and decided he was going to sell cars direct, that was against the law in 35 states to sell. You make something, you're illegal to sell it because there was so much lobbying over the years. Nobody's talking about that now. Every taxi medallion owner fought to stop Uber. It's a much better system. So anything that can be automated will be automated.
Well, Jay, I have to say, I cannot thank you enough for coming on this LinkedIn Live. You are truly a phenomenal guest, and you've accomplished so much that the next time we meet, I will go through the entire list. But suffice to say that, I hopefully everyone has listened and learned and will apply some of the things that you've spoken about in their own lives. And again, if you would like to get Jay's book, the website is scrolling across the bottom. And if anyone has, and it's also in front of his face. And if anyone has any questions, my contact information is on the bottom as well. So thank you all for coming. Jay, thank you again. And keep disrupting.
Thank you for the time.
All right. Take care.